Friends, her name is Wanda Cooper Jones. She is a mother who is spending today, Mother's Day, without her beloved son, whose name was Ahmaud Arbery. Ahmaud, as you have known, was killed in February. And it has taken us 2 months to find out the truth behind Ahmaud's murder. And that is 2 months that is too long. And as we are trying to figure out what to do about this situation during this last week, I've had some thoughts running through my head. And one of them is this, that the church, and by that I mean the white church, is complicit in this murder. And that is because the United States has a long history of white supremacy and racism. And tragically, as a pastor, as a white pastor, I have to fess up that it is largely the white church that is complicit in much of this. And this was seen this last week on our Facebook page when I and Amira posted an image of us standing next to our sign, and it said, "Running while black should not get you murdered in the United States." And we posted that on our Facebook page. And I have to tell you that ever since I posted that, I have been deleting comments that are from, I am going to say this carefully, I do not know if they are from white supremacists, but what I do know is that the logic behind a lot of these posts is the logic of white supremacy. And what I mean by that is this. I have deleted a lot of posts that say that Ahmaud stole a hammer and he was running in boots. Now, if this is true, I don't give a damn, because the message of white supremacy is this: a black person's life is worth about as much as a hammer. That is how low many portions of our country have gone. When we started this country, a black person's life was worth 3/5 of a white person's life. And now we have gone to the point where it is worth about as much as a hammer. And people are posting up pictures of hammers and Timberland boots as if that is justification for killing a black man. And I, as a white man who's trying to preach something smart, has to say, damn, that is not what I want my country to be about. And here's the other thing that I have to say. It is so easy for me, as somebody living in Portland, Oregon, to be able to say, we got those jerks. We got those people who are racists, and point the finger at them and say justice is coming to them. But you know what? That's way too easy for me to do. That's way too easy for us to do. Do I hope justice gets served? Yes, I do. But pointing the finger at these guys is not going to solve the problem of racism and white supremacy throughout the United States. And it was there at the beginning when we said black people were worth 3/5. It was there when we dehumanized them in order to have slavery in our country. And it continues through Jim Crow, and it continues through banks refusing to give loans to black folks so that they couldn't buy houses. And it continues through the GI Bill that benefited white soldiers and not black soldiers. And it continues in Portland, Oregon. One of the people who posted up a comment on there was from Portland. And he said, "Thank you for being a church that talks about racism." And then he talked about some, as far as Portland area goes, some mega churches in the Portland area. and says that they aren't touching the topic of racism. And that makes us complicit. That makes Portland complicit because Portland has swept racism under the rug for far too long. We would rather just say here in Portland, let's not talk about it because it's too difficult, it's too painful, it's too emotional. And thus, when we don't talk about it, it continues to infect our beloved city of Portland and our beloved country of the United States. And we are going to continue to have these brutal acts against Black people because they stole a damn hammer. So, deep breath. And I want to remind you that Jesus, in our passage here today, says that he is the way, the truth, and the life. And those problematic passage that says no one comes to the Father except through Jesus. Now that passage has been used in very exclusive ways. And I'm done with using the Bible and with Jesus, using Jesus to exclude people. Because there's enough exclusion in our world. Jesus lived his life, including people like Ahmad. Jesus lived his life, including people who were on the margins. If you want to go to the Father, then you live a life that is about including those who are on the outside of human culture. Then you live a life bringing those who have been marginalized, who have been told that they're 3/5 of a human, who have been told that their life matters as much as a hammer. You bring those people in. Otherwise, you are not going to the Father. There are people, there's a Facebook page that is looking for justice for these two guys who killed Ahmad. And they say that these are two God-fearing men. They don't fear God. White supremacy does not fear God. Racism does not fear God. If they feared God, they would know at least that the book of Deuteronomy says life for life, foot for foot, eye for eye, hand for hand. And that verse sounds very archaic to us, and it is. But it at least means this: you don't kill someone because they took a hammer. Life for life. That's what Deuteronomy is getting at. In a world without a police state, that section of scripture was trying to limit acts of violence. It said, if somebody takes your eye, you do not take their life. And as the scripture moves on, the prophet Hosea says that God desires mercy and not sacrifice, not violence. God desires steadfast love. And what happened to Ahmad, we have to be honest, was a sacrifice. It was a lynching, an American lynching. And we have to be truthful about that so that we can deal with it. Not just with people living in the South, but with people living here in Portland, Oregon too. We have to deal with the white supremacy that infects me. I grew up in Portland, and this is something that infects me, not just someone who lives in the southern states of the United States. It's something that I have to deal with too. And my final point on this is that before we fall into despair of another Black man getting murdered, there is hope. Because Jesus says these radical words that are hard for me to believe, but he says them. He says that Jesus came so that we could do his works. Not just his works, but as Charlie said earlier, greater works than Jesus. We are called to resist the hatred, the white supremacy, the racism that infects our entire nation so that we can build something even better. And those are the acts that Jesus is calling us to move forward into in this realm. So friends, may we move together into a better world. May we reflect even more. May we talk about it, because it's not just going away. May we find greater acts in this world so that we can finally deal with the racism that has infected us for so long. And that includes in me, and it may include in you as well. So, friend, Jesus calls us to these acts. May we follow him and one another into a realm where all people find God's dwelling place of love and compassion and justice. Amen.
Would you say his name again?
Ahmaud Arbery.
We all need to say that name.
We could go down. I saw on Facebook, Charlie, a link. Somebody put up a message of all the names of our Black siblings who have been murdered.
Yes.
And you are absolutely right. I thought about starting this sermon as going off on that list because those names need to be said. His mom's name needs to be said on this day. And we just can't forget.
We have a lot of practice in Oregon forgetting. We're very good in Oregon at not talking about racism, not thinking about it. We can't be prisoners of our past, but we should be aware of it. And it is one of the shameful things about our education system here in Oregon that we are not taught more or anything. In my day, it was nothing at all about the history of African American people in Oregon. There is so much to be said on that point, but I would like to remind people of 4 or 5 things that I've talked about before. Some other folks who may be listening to Clackamas United Church of Christ for the first time may not be aware of all of these things about Oregon's history and about what a shameful legacy we have in this state. I grew up with, a child of the 50s in the 60s when the civil rights movement was erupting. That was somewhere else. South had the problem, or the big cities of the Northeast. Boston had, the school busing problem, and Chicago had integration problem. No, it didn't bother us here in Oregon so much. But let me say how deeply entrenched racism and white supremacy is in Oregon, because it existed. It was there at the creation of our state.
Yes.
White settlers, European settlers, first started coming to Oregon, the Oregon Territory in the 1830s. By the mid-40s, 1840s, there were enough white folks here, they decided they needed to get some kind of provisional government. So they met together at Champoeg, a famous name if you live around here, where the first settlers got together and formed a somewhat informal government, but they enacted a legal code. In that very first legal code, it was enacted in about 1845, it required all Black persons to leave the Oregon Territory. And if they didn't leave, they were subject to public whipping every 6 months until they did leave. Now, there weren't many. A few of the white settlers had brought some slaves with them. There weren't many other Black people. But one Black person was too many for these white settlers. And it got worse after that. And Congress helped tremendously. Because in 1850, the federal government was very interested in promoting settlement of the Pacific Northwest. Britain still had its eyes on it. Russia had its eyes on it. Spain from California, they still had their eyes on the Pacific Northwest too. So it was very important to the federal government back in Washington that we get Americans out here to settle this place. They passed the Donation Land Act that gave 360 acres of public land free. Anybody who would come out here and settle and agree to stay here for at least 5 years, every person who came got that, except Black people. This law gave free public land. And think about that for a moment. Where did this free public land come from? It was public land that they had stolen from the Native Americans. The federal government didn't buy it from the Native Americans. They took Native American land, gave it to white people, made sure that no Native American or Black person or Asian person, for that matter, could get the benefit of that gift of land, because they wanted a white-only society. And then, if anything, an even more shameful event occurred in the next decade when Oregon finally became a state. Oregon was still a territory when that land donation was given. 1859, we become a state, and in our Constitution, in our state constitution, it said, no Negro or mulatto is permitted to live in the state of Oregon. Let that sink in. Can you imagine that? We have the distinction, if that's the right word, of being the only state in the United States that had it as its foundational document a racial exclusion. We don't want Black people living here. Not that we don't want them, we won't let them live here. You may not live here. And that stayed part of our Constitution until 1826. And the heritage or the descendants of that, the effects of that, are felt to this day. Very, very few people, Black people, lived in Oregon in the first half of the 20th century. It began to change a little bit during World War II because some Black people came to Portland to work in the shipyards, the Kaiser shipyards, building ships for the war effort. But after the war, 1948, something like that, the governor of Oregon said, time to go home. You're not welcome here. Glad you came, help build the ships, but now please go back where you came from. It wasn't the governor of Alabama speaking, right. The president of South Africa. That was the governor of Oregon saying, please, Black folks, leave, go back home. And people made it as hard as possible for Black folks to find a place to live. The Portland Board of Realtors had a code of ethics. No real estate agent in Portland was allowed to sell a house to a Black person because it would lower the property values. That was true in the neighborhood where I live. It was notoriously true in Lake Oswego, but it was true throughout the city of Portland. There were some Black communities that had first gathered in Vanport during the war, build the ships. The Great Flood of 48 destroyed Vanport, and so most Black people then moved to the Albina area. The 1950s was a time of great progress, right? We were building things, we were optimistic. The interstate highway system. Where are we going to put the freeway? Well, let's put it through the Black community. They did. Let's build a fancy new sports arena, the Memorial Coliseum. So they did, in a Black neighborhood, destroying hundreds of Black homes, hundreds of Black businesses. They would never have built the freeway through Eastmoreland. Right. They would never have built Memorial Coliseum in the middle of Alameda or Lawlhurst. Of course not. Black neighborhoods don't matter. Black businesses don't matter. We don't even see them. We think of our history only in terms of white experience. White experience is the only thing that matters. And that heritage is with us today. I can't get over this as I think about it. When the early 1960s, as I said, the time of the burgeoning, the blossoming of the civil rights movement, Black folks and their white allies were marching in the South for voting rights, to integrate the bus systems, to try to be able to eat at the same lunch counter, to integrate the schools. Martin Luther King has his marvelous, wonderful speech, I Have a Dream. All this is going on, 62, 63, 64, 65. In 1965, Springfield School District built a new high school. Springfield's a town, for those who don't know Oregon, about 100 miles south of us here in Clackamas United Church of Christ. It's a suburb of the city of Eugene. They built a new high school. Had to name it for somebody, and they named it for Samuel Thurston, who was the guy 100 years before who wrote that Donation Land Act and specifically put in the provision saying only white people can take advantage of it. And the reason he put it in there, he was quite frank, quite candid about it. Black people would be a curse upon Oregon. Yeah. Those are his words. And in 1965, Springfield thought it was appropriate to name a high school for that white supremacist, that thoroughgoing racist. You know, just 2 years after I Have a Dream, just a year after Black churches are being bombed in Alabama, Oregon decides it's a good idea to name a high school for a white supremacist. We look around Portland today, we look around Oregon today, we know the statistics. Black kids are expelled from schools at a much higher rate than white kids. Black drivers are pulled over at a much higher rate than white drivers. Black renters of apartments are discriminated against, are charged higher rents, higher deposits for the same apartment than white people. We are a racist society in 2020 as much as we were in 1850. I hope and I pray that people hear your message, Adam. I wish your sermon today could be broadcast to the world. Let's make it happen. But thank you for your words. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your courage.
Well, Charlie, I thank you. And we've had so many comments about how important the history is that you just gave to us about Oregon and about Portland. And you said that this was all swept under the rug when you were in high school. And I don't remember it when I was in high school in the 1990s. I'm hopeful that it's at least being taught in the high schools now. But I have my doubts, and depends on which high school you're at, I'm sure, as well. So, but thank you, Charlie, for your wisdom and knowledge and inspiration on this. It's great. We have a lot of work to do. Jesus calls us to that work. So, friends, I invite you to join Charlie as he leads us into our unison benediction, because our worship service is about to conclude, but we are in this work together. So when this is concluded, we continue with our work today and always. So Charlie, I invite you to lead us in the unison benediction.
Some things in our history are worth remembering and worth cherishing. And this benediction that we're going to say together is one of them. Hebrew tradition says that God gave this blessing to Moses and told Moses to go give it to the high priest. And the high priest then is supposed to give this blessing over the Israelites for all the generations to come. So these words that we are about to read together are at least 25 centuries old and maybe even 35 centuries old. So think of the millions and millions and millions of people of faith, Jews and Christians alike, who have heard these words, who have read these words, who have listened to these words, who have been blessed by these words. We can rejoice that there are good people, yes, and good people who have heard good things from God. We can rejoice in his blessing. And this is the Mosaic blessing from the book of Numbers in the Hebrew scriptures. Let's read it together. May God bless you
and keep you.
May God's face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May God look upon you with kindness and bring you peace this day and forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Grace and peace be with you, friends.
Hi everyone, this is Adam Erickson, reminding you that no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome at Clackamas United Church of Christ. We are located at 15303 Southeast Webster Road in Milwaukee, Oregon. We are so glad that you found this podcast. All of our podcasts will always be free, but we rely on the financial support of our members and our friends. If this podcast meant something to you, you can help us out in two ways. You can share this podcast with someone you think might be interested. You can also help us financially by donating to the wonderful missions we have here at Clackamas United Church of Christ. To do so, you can go to our Facebook page, our website, or our YouTube channel, and click on the Donate Here button. Our worship services start at 10:30 on Sundays, except for during the summer months when we start at 10 o'clock. If you would like more information on our church, you can visit our website at c-ucc.org. You can also reach out to me through email at adam@c-ucc.org. Until next time, grace and peace be with you.